That's the camera that's looking at you. Welcome to those who are live streaming. To those who are in the room, continue enjoying your lunch. I thought we were live streaming earlier, but we were not yet. So if you are looking at us online, the time is 12:19. We're going to begin in just a few more minutes. So just get yourself into a comfortable chair, and we're just going to get a little more nosh on our plates, and then we will begin. Shabbat Shalom.
So they won't be able to read the screen.
You know what I'll do? If you want, I can do it in the back room. But I can only do it for like a minute. But I can zoom in on the TV using
No,
this.
there's no way to just get the TV.
That's not connected to the system.
Okay,
But I can take that camera
I understand what you're saying.
and I can zoom it into the TV if you want.
You want her to do that? Right now, what they're seeing is this. Why would you have to zoom it back out again?
So that they can see the panel. Otherwise, they can't see anything but the TV.
Right now, it looks like you can see the TV and us.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we had all the options. Mike talking very flexible. Actually, the fourth thing we were doing was important.
We ready to go?
Yeah, I'm just going to text Barack and say, since you're late, you can start watching us on the stream.
Shabbat Shalom once again, everybody. We're so grateful that we can share, break bread together, and be in this bright space. And thank you to our maintenance team. We're so grateful that you're dropping off some soda for us if anybody wants something that bubbles with your lunch. This is really an event that was only made possible because Henry, Joe, and Mark were willing to uproot their lives and travel to Israel to bear witness to not only the suffering in the wake of October 7th, but also the beginning of repair that was happening on the ground in Israel. And we're just deeply grateful that the three of you carved out time and then spent all of this additional time preparing remarks today so that you can be our eyes in the land of Israel. And so this is an opportunity for us first to hear their observations. I think it was a 4-day mission. They're going to share observations and kind of what they did during those days. And then I'm going to open it up for Q&A, and I'll facilitate that piece. And there's going to be photos shown during this presentation. If you'd like those photos after the presentation, you can email me. I have them online. I can share them with you. That's less for the group in the room who has a very clear sight of the TV, and more for anybody who is watching on live stream. My email is rabbicarol, Karol, at crsnyc.org. But I'm not going to be checking it for the next few days because I'm going to be resting like all of you. So I'll send it to you in the beginning of January. And of course, we're happy to share that presentation. I'm going to turn it over to our speakers to share with us your experiences. Thank you so much.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Mark Landis. I'm the member of this panel who does not co-chair the Israel Committee at Rodeph Sholom, as do my colleagues. We traveled to Israel on very short notice, as Rabbi Julie mentioned, very last minute, on a Reform Movement Solidarity mission, co-sponsored what I would describe as an alphabet soup of our Reform Movement leadership. ARZA, the Association of Reform Zionists of America, Arzenu, which is the worldwide version of that, the Union for Reform Judaism, which is what it sounds like, the World Union for Progressive Judaism, which is the worldwide version of the URJ, and we are hosted by IMPJ, which is the Israeli Progressive Reform Movement, and Maram, the Association of Reform Rabbis in Israel. We were lucky in a sense that we didn't know this when we signed up, but it turned out we were there for ceasefire week. So things were a little bit calmer than perhaps before or after. And I should mention that while we would encourage all of you to seek an opportunity to travel to Israel, it's not so easy to get there right now because most airlines have discontinued their direct flights. In fact, only El Al is flying to Israel at the moment, which means there aren't as many direct flights as there used to be. We had all connected in different places as a result. We arrived on late Sunday afternoon and dined with our hosts from the Israeli movement Sunday evening. So our first full day of our mission was on Monday. And on Monday, we went south. We headed to a town called Hura. Hura is a Bedouin village near Beersheba, right across the road from Meitar, where my cousins live. And Hura is a recognized town, unlike many of the other Bedouin communities. They are not protected by the Iron Dome, so they are living at greater risk than most Israelis. The town is 50% living in poverty, 40% unemployment, and they're working to change the reality on the ground. For them, fake news is a problem. You get reports there's stone throwing happening somewhere, and it turns out not to be true. And there we met with the deputy mayor. Although Bedouin, he's known by everybody as Yitzhak. His son served in the Golani Brigade and was killed, and emphasized the fact that we are all in this battle together. The Bedouin community were among the first victims of the October 7th attacks. They were killed, they were kidnapped, they had hostages taken, victims of rocket attacks. Folks from Hora were among those who charged forward to the music festival, risking their own lives to try to help evacuate people. And there was last week's news. You've all, of course, heard about the tragic shooting of 3 hostages by the IDF. And on that, I would say, along with the names of Alon Shamriz and Yotar Chaim, you should also hold close the name of Samir Taleka, the son of Layla, who is another hero from Hora. Many people don't realize that the 3 hostages that died were not all Jews. 2 Jews and a Bedouin I know it sounds like the start of a walking into a bar joke, but it's not. They are our allies there in building a better Israel, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. The next thing on our schedule for Monday was the harvest. So many people have been called up into service that it has become a common service project both for Israelis and visitors to help out with the harvest. We were scheduled to harvest oranges. You won't see any photos of that, however. We did not. It was raining that day. And I'm not sure whether they decided that we were just like too many soft people from North and South America, or maybe there were too many rabbis on the trip and they didn't want the rabbis to have to pick in the rain, but we did not pick oranges. Instead, we traveled to Kibbutz Sderot. Kibbutz Sderot is a second-line kibbutz around Gaza, meaning it was not hit directly by the attacks, but they're across the street from Sderot that was. And that's where we first met with Rabbi Yael Vergon of the Sha'ar HaNegev Regional Council. And for those of you who are thinking about rabbis being leaders of congregations with a building in a city or a town, you need to adjust your expectation for other parts of Israel. Think about the Old West. Think about a traveling preacher riding from one town to another on horseback. They're not on horseback, but Rabbi Yael serves 12 kibbutzim and moshavim that are all in the what now gets referred to as the Gaza envelope.
Yael is Rabbi Vargon. Rabbi Vargon is with the scarf on in the picture. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
No.
So, from the Sha'ar HaNegev region, there were 78 deaths, dozens were kidnapped, and Rabbi Yael, who's been serving those communities for 5 years, knows every single one of them. Our rabbis there are heroes, they're first responders. Kibbutz Sderot was established in December 1941. It was the first settlement in the Negev. And over the years, the population has gradually declined. Young people have been attracted to the bigger cities. The kibbutz had been closed from October 7th until a few days before we arrived for military use. They're down to 120 people out of the 800 plus who were living there. Even though they're outside the mandatory evacuation zone, people don't feel safe. So they have left following their neighbors. And we heard there the phrase we heard many times during our visit. The Israeli government broke its covenant. It broke its promise to the frontline villages and kibbutzim that they would be there to defend them, because it took, as you know, 11 hours for there to be a semblance of resolution to what happened on October 7th. One of the people from Kibbutz Sderot we heard from was a woman named Sharon. She was a frequent volunteer for a program called Road to Recovery. They would transport Palestinians from Gaza from the border to hospitals in Israel and bring them back afterward to help them get treatment. And following the events that have been going on and the reactions in the U.S., she was feeling very much that it's now me too, except if you're a Jew, and feeling very abandoned by allies with whom we and they have worked with on progressive causes over the years. We also lost on October 7th a charismatic Reform Jew who was the head of the Sha'ar HaNegev Regional Council, Ophir Libstein, who was killed during the fighting. And he was the visionary who had great plans for the region, bike lanes on the roads, a regional industrial park to create jobs, and everybody is now at a loss as to who will step up and who will take on leadership on these kinds of projects, if in fact they're viable, because we don't know when it will be safe for people to return, and when beyond that, when people will feel comfortable returning. The next day, we traveled to Mishmar HaEmek in the Jezreel Valley. And there we met with representatives from Kibbutzim Nahal Oz and Gvin. And we had an opportunity to meet in small groups with some of the survivors. We each sat with a different representative from these kibbutzim. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about my conversation with Yael. And I don't want you to think everybody in Israel is named Yael, but let's just say on that day, we met 5 rabbis, and 4 of them were named Yael, in addition to this woman, Yael, who was not a rabbi. October 7th was supposed to be the celebration of the 70th anniversary of the founding of Kibbutz Nachal Oz. Yael and her sister wrote a play, which included as a line in it, what happened to the good old days when we could go to the shuk in Gaza? Needless to say, this celebration has not taken place. Yael's story is that she started out with her daughter in the downstairs safe room in her house. Her house has 2 safe rooms. And thankfully, her husband said, come upstairs with me and the boys. And they did, because on the first floor, they might not have been here to tell the tale. 5 of them in a safe room with no communications for most of the time. The communications towers were down. WhatsApp was down. They were finally able to get like second and third-hand messages through SMS, old-fashioned texting. Says something for communications redundancy. Her best friend next door was killed. Her sister, who lived 2 doors down, and her mother survived. They told them, don't go outside yet after the army had come, but they opened the door and found a dead terrorist on the front steps. That's how close they were to losing their lives. The security guard at the entrance to the kibbutz was killed, leaving a widow and children, as were many others. Her 14-year-old son, the more sensitive one of the boys, was one of 6 classmates in school his age. The 2 girls were killed. The older son's motorcycle is missing. He's fine. The motorcycle, they know it's in Gaza because they have, a tracker on it. But that's, all they know about that. They don't know what they need. They don't know if or when they'll be able to return. They're still dealing with people from the kibbutz that are being held hostage. One with kids who are alone, another one with kids where one of the siblings was killed. And Yael's story was mostly about just trying not to cry in front of her kids. We also heard that afternoon from Amir Tabon, whose name may be familiar to you. He's a Haaretz reporter and often on CNN and other videos as a result. Has a similar story. He and his family were in a safe room as well. One of his young daughters still asks, can I leave the room? And she won't close her door at night. And he told us, maybe it's changed since then, but as of then, which was still 6 weeks after the attacks, no government minister had visited the Nachal Oz survivors. Nobody. It is luck, he said, that he's there. If they had found his house key, because he did have a house key outside, they'd be dead. And for him, again, the big issue was rebuilding trust in the Israeli government after they broke their contract to defend their community, returned for Nachal Oz protecting the border. Emphasized that they could not allow October 7th to ever be repeated. And another common theme we heard, and we heard here as well, is that President Biden is Israel's best friend ever in the White House, except maybe for Truman, of course, for providing military support, for visiting during wartime, for a meme that was very popular that just has Biden saying, don't. The implication being him managing the Israeli war effort so that when Netanyahu was threatening to go too far in one direction or another, driven by the hardliners in his government, there was Biden there to pull him back and say, don't do that. I'm going to skip past the time we spent with our panel of rabbis that afternoon, other than to repeat what I said before. They're heroes. They do incredible work. They thankfully are getting support from their rabbinic colleagues, both there and back here and around the world, because even the rabbis need somebody to talk to as well. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Joe to talk about day 3.
So, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So, what I'd like to talk about, so first of all, some of you have commented on my t-shirt, Bring Them Home Now. I don't typically wear a t-shirt to shul, but I thought it was appropriate today. So today is day 78, 78 days since the war began and hostages have been taken. There's still approximately 130 hostages that are in Gaza today. You mentioned the tragedy last week. We woke up yesterday to the news that Gadi Chagai was murdered in captivity. His wife, Judy Weinstein, is still in captivity. This is the fact. We need to bring them home now. So I want to start, when we were there, we had the opportunity to learn at HUC, and we had the wonderful opportunity to learn with the esteemed Rabbi Dalia Marks, and she taught us about Pidyon Shvuin, the redemption of the captives. And I want to put it in context that there's still debate about exchanges for hostages, that still is a real thing. When we were there, as Mark mentioned, we were there during a ceasefire. So it was a little bit euphoric because every night hostages were being released. There was a little bit of psychological warfare going on because when were they going to let the names out? There was one night where the hostages were supposed to be released at around 8 p.m. They didn't get released until 11 p.m. It was surreal for me, because we were there. I think many of you know, or some of you know, our daughter lives in Tel Aviv. So up until that time, we were talking to her as, she's racing up and down the stairs to go to the bomb shelter numerous times. And it was very quiet while we were there. Before our trip, I would be watching the news constantly. And while we were there, we were on the bus, we're davening. Some of us were at Shachrit at 6:45 in the morning, not getting back till 9 o'clock at night, exhausted. You really weren't tuned into the news, and so we relied upon our guides to tell us what was going on. But I want to go back to Pidyon Shvuin, the redemption of the hostages, the captives. And what we did was a text study of various texts about whether the importance of redemption of captives. So we learned from Rambam, which I'd like to read and put all of this in context. So Rambam, Mishnah Torah, Gifts to the Poor, the redemption of captives receives priority over sustaining the poor and providing them with clothing. There is no greater mitzvah than the redemption of captives. For captives is among those who are hungry, thirsty, unclothed, and he or she is in mortal peril. If someone pays no attention to his redemption, he or she violates the negative commandments. Do not harden your heart or close your hand. Do not stand by when the blood of your neighbor is in danger. And you don't do it, you've also negated the observance of the positive commandments. You shall certainly open up your hand to him or her, and your brother or sister shall live with you. Save those who are taken for death. Think about that. And many other decrees of this nature. There is no greater mitzvah than the redemption of the captives. So that's from Maimonides. So when we were there, and I'm going to jump around just a little bit, but I want to stick with the captives. We had the opportunity to, we had the opportunity to meet with Lee and Shelley Siegel. And so Lee is on the right. His brother is Keith Siegel, and his sister-in-law is Aviva Siegel. And they were residents of Kfar Aza. And while we were there, Aviva was released, and yet Keith is still in captivity.
No relation. Spell it wrong.
What can I tell you? So think about that your families are divided. Many of the hostages that were released when we were there were children, women, mothers, grandmothers, but the fathers and the grandfathers are still being held in captivity. We also had the opportunity that day to meet with Rabbi Gilad Karev, who was the former head of the Reform movement in Israel. and is now a member of Knesset, as well as with Idan Roll, who's former deputy foreign minister, member of the Yesh Atid party. Rabbi Karev is on the left, is a member of the Labor Party, and I think both of them are relatively liberal. Idan is more of a centrist, but both of them talked about how this war is an existential threat to the state of Israel and the Jewish people. I want to say that again. It's an existential threat to the state of Israel and the Jewish people. They compared it to the Six-Day War and the Yom Kippur War. The difference between their opinions are that Gilad still believes in a two-state solution and Elon does not, or he doesn't think it's going to get there soon, and that it will take the annihilation of Hamas for there to be security. And I want to put this in context of, you mentioned the Gaza envelope, which are the surrounding areas of the kibbutzim that are along the border of Gaza. These are the most peace-loving, two-state solution, go into Gaza to help people in any way possible. These were kibbutzim that had Gazans working on them, for them, thank you. So in that context, without there being security, and you talked about the social contract between not only these kibbutzim, but all of Israeli society being broken, but from a security standpoint, they will not go back unless they are guaranteed that they can be safe. And if they don't go back, then that means the front line becomes Ashkelon, Ashdod, and Tel Aviv. And that's why it's such an existential threat to the entire state of Israel. So we went to Hostage Square, right? So that's 53 days, 11 hours, 25 minutes, and 12 seconds. As I mentioned before, we're now at 78 days. That table, many of you may have seen the table that was on on 81st Street, similar. At that point, you know, when it was first set up, there were 240 empty seats. I want to show you another picture if you'll click forward. This is what was happening, this kind of graffiti on the board where people were signing messages to the families. This silent protester has these pictures, and I want to show them because it's extremely important. These pictures of the children of the Bibas family are still being held in captivity. Their parents are still being held in captivity. These are only 4 out of the remaining 130 that are in captivity. So, as I mentioned before, there is light, and I think you alluded to it, and there is hope. And so I want to go back and just, the group of young adults here are from the Mechina program that some of us are aware of because we even actually thought about funding the Mechina program from our committee. So this is the gap year in between high school and college. And so I'd like to point out the young lady in the green shirt is Aiden Siselski. So some of us know the Siselski family, but more importantly, for Carolyn and myself, one of our best college friends is Inda Martinez, who is Aiden's mother. So it was great to be able to see one of our close friends' daughter, who is now the director of the program. And for these kids, the 3 on the left of Aiden, could be in the Army or should be in the Army this year, but instead they're taking this gap year. So many of their friends are in the Army, many of their friends are in Gaza. But what they're doing from a leadership standpoint is assisting in other ways, and this is the future of the Reform movement. The young lady, and I forget the kids' names, but the young lady in the brown sweater had never had any contact before with the Reform movement. She didn't go to camp, she didn't participate, and yet she felt so connected to the movement that these are our leaders, this is our hope for the future. And so what I just want to wrap up with, and then I'll turn it over to Henry, is particularly for the hostage families today, They are afraid that the plight of their loved ones, the hostages, is going to become like white noise. And so we must do our part to do everything that we can to keep this everybody's top agenda. So it means calling your elected officials. There's a website called Take 1 Minute Now. So I don't have it, but we can. 1 minute a day. Thank you. It's on the website. Please use the website. There's great material on the website. Hang up posters that some of us are doing. Adopt a hostage. Pray for them. Say their names. Stay aware of what's going on. And I would say, and I think it's even under consideration, of participating in a mission like the three of us had the opportunity to do. And just to reiterate what Mark said, we were there, and people could not thank us enough for our participation and just showing up. So let me turn it over to Henry and get your...
Thanks, Joe. This was a very emotional trip for a lot of people, as you can imagine. So this thing about them being happy to see us is a great understatement. They were very happy to see us. And the most amazing thing to me was the second sentence after they told us how happy they were to see us was they were worried about us because they've been hearing about all the anti-Semitism here. So I said to them, don't worry about us. We'll be fine. Take care of yourself. So on Thursday, we first went to HUC and we heard a talk by Rabbi Marmer, who is the provost there, and I don't remember what it was about. Joe told me, and I've forgotten already. It was totally, the only thing that was of any interest to this group is that we ran into Sari Laufer there, who was also on a mission with a group of rabbis. But then Thursday, we went to one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. You have to think about this for a minute. 200,000 people were displaced, and most of them left with the shirts on their back. They all needed food. They all needed clothing. They all needed housing. They needed to be able to get around. They needed to be able to see doctors. Where are they going to get that from? And what was set up was in the roughly 12 hours, the Israeli volunteers, not the government, citizens, set up these amazing centers where people could go if they needed clothes, if they needed food, if they needed transportation. They would deliver stuff to them if they wanted it. And how did they set up? You know who these people were? These are all the people who the day before were clamoring about democracy. And because they had all the names of all these people and they had an organization, they were able to set it up. So they went up and they set up this command center in Jerusalem, and this is in all the major cities in Israel, and they call it a Hamal, or the Civil Command Center. And I think of it as Amazon, because take a look at what you see here. You see people sitting at desks taking orders. You see storerooms with this stuff, and what I didn't show you are pictures of people coming to take the stuff, and it's all computerized. So they gave us the example of one soldier didn't have his equipment with him because he had to leave his home, so he needed a size 3 boot. And so he called in and he said, I need a size 3 boot, and they found somebody who had a size 3 boot, and they got it to him so that he could report to his unit. It's an amazing operation. Fortunately, it's now less necessary than it was because people are set up. The other thing I would mention is, I don't remember, somebody said to me that they heard that the tourist business in Israel must be really good because they tried to get a hotel reservation and the hotel was all booked. And I said, no, the people in the hotel are the refugees. In our hotel, 85% of the rooms were refugees from Sderot. So it's not easy. You read about 100,000 refugees and you say, oh, well, what the big deal? But it's not easy finding food, clothing, and housing for that many people in a country as small as Israel. So this was an amazing operation that they set up, without which a lot of people would have been much worse situation. After that, on Thursday, we went to Hadassah Hospital. Joe and I ran into Nir Barkin, who's the rabbi at Yotzma in Modin. We said hello. We came back. It took us half an hour to find the group. The group went in to visit some of the people who were in the hospital. But by then, most of the people who had been injured in the initial onslaught had left, so there weren't nearly as many people in the hospital. And that basically ended our trip. That night we had dinner and we headed for the airport. I want to talk a little bit about something that Mark and I did last weekend, which is connected, which is we went to the... Please try again. Yeah, I know. We went to the URJ 150th anniversary celebration in Washington. It ran Thursday night, Saturday, and Sunday morning, and then following that, Sunday night and Monday was a day and a half on Israel. And for me, the highlight, as always at these things, is the music. And on the left, you can see all the famous Jewish singers that you can think of lined up there, and we spent 2 hours singing every song that you can think of from the last 150 years of Jewish singing. Everything. Rabbi, what's the name of the gentleman that wrote all the classic music? Carl probably knows. What's the name? What? No. Lewandowski. Everything from Lewandowski to Aria Arons. So it was a real 150th anniversary. It took 2 hours. My watch kept telling me that everything was too loud and I was going to lose my hearing. But it was great. The next day, the highlight. I'll just go back a minute, please. I just want you to read these words that are on the screen. I'll read them for the people on the thing. It says, "Authentic Judaism is not doing what our ancestors did, but doing what they would have done if they were still alive today." And that, I think, is a really good definition of Reform Judaism. And what that screen on the right is about is the URJ put together a history of itself for the last 150 years. And I hope it was, I'm pretty sure it was taped and that it'll be available soon. And if we do get it, we'll send it around. And I urge everybody to watch it because it's spectacular. The most amazing thing one of the more amazing things to me was the the narrators were Dana Bash and David Ushery and David Gregory, I'm sorry. And I don't know, the odds that anybody, that I would have thought David Gregory was Jewish was, infinitesimal, but he is. Yeah. Okay, and also during the day we heard from Doug Emhoff, who, as you know, is the husband of Kamala Harris, and they call him the second gentleman. And we also heard from leaders of IMPJ. Sunday night and Monday, as I told you, was devoted entirely to Israel issues. It was highlighted by talks by Gilad Kariv on the left and former Ambassador Tom Nides on the right. They gave very interesting talks on where things are. I just need to emphasize that whatever you hear, whoever you hear from, whether it's Tom Friedman or Joe Biden, Israel is never, ever going to settle unless the hostages come home. That's a non-negotiable for them. And the problem is that for Hamas, the non-negotiables is that Israel ceases to exist. So you can read all these articles about how, well, if you just grant this, then the thing would end. But it isn't going to happen, I don't think, because they're never going to agree to not to those things. That's the way I heard it. They'll probably tell you something different. But in summing up that weekend, last weekend, URJ and the IMPG are healthy. They're growing. They have to do some more work with contacting our younger people because there's a fair lack of education for some of them, and I can go into that more if you want. As I said, Gilad Kariv said the Israeli army is going to continue until they defeat Hamas completely, although they will try and limit civilian casualties and rescue the hostages. He implied that he doesn't think the current government's going to last past the end of the war. I think I can tell you that nobody's going to vote for the current government other than their far-right allies. And then we talked a little bit about the World Zionist Organization vote that's coming up next in 2025, but that's for another session.
So before I give it to Mark, just real quickly.
Never given a talk, but Joe hasn't corrected me.
Exactly. So I'm not going to correct you. I'm just going to add. So you use the term refugees. I want to really change that to displaced individuals. These are people from the north and the south who are in unsafe areas. They're in war zones, whether on the border of Lebanon or on the border of Gaza. So I call them displaced, not refugees, as we typically know the term. And you mentioned our meeting with Rabbi Barkan, and that is extremely important for our relationship that we've established over the years. But right now, we have a twinning relationship with the congregation Yotzma, and we are raising money now immediately for everything they are doing. And they are actually twinned in supporting Nir Oz, which is one of the kibbutzim that was worst hit. And if you've seen the horrific pictures of that, and so I just wanted to mention that. So anybody who hasn't contributed, please contribute to that effort. This is not just an emergency effort, but hopefully a long-term relationship that we are going to maintain for years between us. Yeah. So, Mark?
So I said I wanted to come back a little bit to things to feel good about and things to have some optimism for. We heard a lot of talk about shared society, and I'm going to simply define shared society by what it's not. Shared society is not mere coexistence. Shared society is participating together in building Israel, not just you do your thing and I do my thing. We talk about Hura again, where the unofficial slogan seemed to be that working together is the only answer. And we met with folks from a group called AJEC NISPED, which has a really long name. NISPED is the Negev Institute for Strategies of Peace and Development, and they helped form AJEC, the Arab Jewish Center for Equality, Empowerment, and Cooperation. More importantly, AJEC is actually Arabic for I am coming toward you, meaning to be able to work together. The organization was co-founded by the Bedouin leadership in Hura, and by a leading peace activist, Vivian Silver, Zichronah Livracha, who was killed on October 7th. The kinds of things they do: establish emergency response centers. They have 6 teams to provide services throughout some of the Bedouin towns and villages. Portable bomb shelters for impacted communities. They have finally obtained food vouchers for the people living in poverty, which up until recently, up until the last government, those vouchers were only made available to ultra-Orthodox Jews. Now they're available to Jews and non-Jews. They're funded by the Education Ministry because they're also involved in teaching skills, and they have created a gap year program, 2 gap year programs, one for Arab and Jewish kids to learn together, another for Arab girls for an opportunity for leadership training. When we were there was a group of young Arab women being trained in first aid, some in hopes that they'll have an opportunity for an employment, others just to help them prepare for emergencies. And in Haifa, we were at the Leo Beck School, where we met with high school students who were serving the large evacuee population in Haifa. They're leading Kabbalat Shabbat at the local hotels. They're helping with the harvest. They're acting as babysitters for younger kids, or blowing up balloons to throw them birthday parties, since they may be away from home, but they're still having birthdays. Haifa is an integrated city where everybody feels welcome. And these kids, young adults, are strongly committed to and prepared for their military service, but they're still dreaming of a peaceful future. We heard from some of the teachers at Leo Beck. We heard from Amani, an Arab teacher who left her comfort zone to come to teach Arabic at a Jewish school, handle Arabic communications with the community, and engage in building a shared society. And she emphasized that she has respect for different people's identity, and that there's plenty of land for everybody to share. And we also heard from Rima, who is a Christian teacher at the school, that we're all suffering and we're dealing with this together, and how can we be as a light as Arabs and Jews together. We heard from Rabbi Miriam Klamova of Shirat Hayam. She made Aliyah 7 years ago. She became a rabbi because she wanted to build a community. And her community is centered around immigrants from Russia and from the Ukraine. She says people come to them from everywhere. The IMPJ is building out a website to support small businesses, like the artists who had a small art store that we met when we were visiting the synagogue in Haifa. Needless to say, business is down. And when we say business is down, business has gone to zero. So there's an opportunity to purchase from small stores there and be able to support communities that way. And Joe has already mentioned our sacred partnership with Yotzma. So there are a lot of opportunities for us to continue to support good work that is happening there, as well as donating directly through our website to that partnership. Thank you for hearing us out, and we're available to take questions.
Thank you so much. Let's pause for some applause. We are so grateful to the three of you, not just for bearing witness, but then for reliving what I'm sure was a very painful experience abroad. We know that this is Shabbat afternoon. We want to make it okay for anybody who's feeling like they're ready for their quiet Shabbat day. If you'd like to leave, if you have another appointment, please don't worry. You absolutely can. We're going to open it up for Q&A, but I know that Mark, Joe, and Henry are also available to answer questions by email, and you know where to find them in Rodeph Sholom. I'm going to open the floor for questions, but I think what I'm going to do is just take 2 or 3. Then we're officially going to close the program by singing Hatikva together as a community, but then our 3 speakers will stick around, of course, to engage you with further conversation. But I have to bring you a mic because our live streamers want to hear your questions too. So Martha, we're going to start with you, then Rhonda, then Becky. No, because the live stream can't hear you.
Okay. Hi. I just want to know, did you pay for this entire trip? Did you pay for the entire trip? And where did you stay? And just bravo for all you've accomplished. You've been to so many places and you spoke to so many people. It's amazing. But those are my questions.
Okay.
Martha, we're going to have to pay you after the meeting for that question. Yeah, we paid for it. We stayed at a hotel in Jerusalem called Dan Panorama, which was 85% displaced persons. Is that the right word I should use? 85% displaced persons. Whatever. And was there something else that? Yeah, we paid for everything.
Okay. You have one.
A quick plug for J Squared, who worked with us to organize the trip, and I know works closely with Rodeph and with lots of other reform movement organizations. And should we put something similar together here, that would be a great place to start. The only other thing I would say is you heard about a third at most of what we covered during those days. But we don't have 2 hours.
Go to Rhonda.
Thank you. Thank you for taking this mission to Israel at this difficult time, and thank you for reporting to us. One of the things that was really new to me was what Mark said about how the Bedouin community is not protected by Iron Dome. When is that going to be fixed? Why wouldn't, it's part of Israel, why isn't it protected by Iron Dome? I am horrified by that.
I'm just going to take that because it's a big question. It has to do with the migratory nature of Bedouin communities, that they're nomadic. And so even though they have a lot of infrastructure and they don't move as quickly as they used to, they have to be able to register their villages, and there's a real tension. And this is not to justify, because wherever they are, they should be protected. But it's a tension between kind of allowing them the autonomy to move and them having to embed themselves in all of the bureaucracies that can protect them. So it's not an easy question. It absolutely needs a solution. I'm really grateful you raised it because it's a justice issue, but that's just on one foot what's going on there. Yeah.
Just to be clear, some Bedouin villages are protected.
All right, we're going to go to Becky, and then I see Val, and I see Steve, and then we're going to do Hatikva.
Just a little departure. Did you have experience in the north in addressing the issue with the Hezbollah, et cetera?
Anything related to Lebanon?
No, the furthest north we went was Mishmar HaEmek, which was where we met with the residents from Nachal Oz. So anything further north than that we didn't get to. Haifa, but that's pretty much parallel.
To you, Val?
I attended something at the JCC where someone who operates the command center, Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, spoke, and there's a recording of it if anybody wants it. And I've been in touch with them about how to volunteer there, but they don't seem to be really set up to welcome groups yet, that you just have to be in Israel and then maybe find something to do. Is that the case, or is there anything that people can prepare ahead of time?
So I think that is the case. I mean, if you went with a group, we were only there for 4 days, so they only kind of ran us through the Hamal in Jerusalem. But people from our trip stayed and took an Airbnb in Tel Aviv and volunteered on their own. There are plenty of Israelis that are volunteering and going to the Hamal and preparing food. And it's going to transition because, as Henry talked about, the immediate need was urgent. One of the things you didn't mention was also the clergies that worked for the families who had members who passed away, and they needed to go to Shiva, and they needed to provide funeral services. So they coordinated across all denominational movements, and it didn't matter who the rabbi or clergy was. But I think now as the transition and people start to return home, or as they remain in the hotels, particularly in the big cities, is what are they going to do for the kids? And the psychological, support and sports services. And, they've set up schools, temporary schools for these evacuees, these displaced people. Think about it. I mean, kids from Sderot are now living in Jerusalem, and their lives have all been disrupted.
A couple of very specific volunteer opportunities right now. Jewish National Fund is running very short missions, approximately a week long. You can find on the JNF website. There's a program called Sarel that enables people to volunteer at Israeli military bases in civilian roles, freeing up civilians or replacing civilians who have been called to more active roles. And there's an organization called Skilled Volunteers for Israel, led by my friend Marla Gamaran. There's opportunities for fluent Hebrew speakers to assist with offering teaching online, but she also has access to other... Oh, okay. Even better. But she also has access to other longer-term opportunities to volunteer.
Thank you. All right, we're going to do it. Oh, okay. Still, sign up. Worth it.
Oh, thank you very much for doing this. It was wonderful, eye-opening. By the way, I was in Sarel, and I spent the best summer of my life filling sandbags in the Golan Heights in the broiling sun. So 2 questions. What are those dog tags you're wearing? Are they souvenirs?
They say, bring the hostages home.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Repeat it so the people on the live stream.
The question was, what are the dog tags they're wearing?
No, they can't hear. You have to say it, Steve, because you have the mic.
Oh, bring the hostages home. Okay, thank you. So we have all the money we'll ever need if we die by 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And if we want to send money, who do we send it to? Could you furnish a list of people or organizations that could you do that? Okay, thank you.
It's all on the website, and that's a perfect closing question because, as was mentioned, the emergency task force related to Israel that was convened just in the wake of the October 7th massacre is connected to Yotzma, which is a reform community that, thanks to the work of the Tzedakah Committee, which has existed under the leadership of congregants Henry and Joe, and also under the leadership of Arnie and Monica, who are here today, who boldly and with strength, but with so many other people who are here who attended those meetings and who continue to be a part of that, that's actually a relationship that we've been nurturing for 20 years. And so when it was time for us to think about how do we, A, meet the need of people just wanting to do something, but knowing that their money isn't just funding necessarily like a large organization, but really, really helping the victims, we already had this beautiful relationship because of the work of our congregation where we knew who to reach out to. Nir Barkin, the rabbi, had already created a video to celebrate the two of your retirement from the Israel Committee just 3 years ago. So we had his email, we had been in touch with him. It was a very live relationship, and not everybody has that. So the emergency task force at Rodeph Sholom, which won't exist forever, God willing, is just collecting money to give to Yozma because Yozma is providing relief to Nir Oz, which is one of the kibbutzim that was hit most hard by the terrorist attack. So that is one way to make sure that your dollars are going on behalf of Congregation Rodeph Sholom to a key partner for us. But if you're also interested in knowing about some of the larger organizations that are doing different kinds of work, you can go to our Israel resource page, which I believe currently is just one click from the homepage. It's easy to see. So I'm going to invite everybody to please rise as you're able. I'm going to move this pop-up, and we're going to conclude our session today with words of Hatikva. Again, just a reminder, Hatikva means the hope, and I think all of you reminded us today, especially you, Mark, Joe, and Henry, about all we have to hope for. Kol od balevav penima Nefesh Yehudi Homiya Ufa'ate Mizrach Kadima Hayin Litzion Sophia Hodlo Avda Tikvatenu Hatikva bat shnot alpayim liotam chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim liotam chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. Thank you all. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Henry, Joe, and Mark. And thank you to those of you on our live stream. We're going to conclude the live stream, but if you'd like to ask questions and stick